Before we get started, this game is not compatible with the PlayStation TV, so this review is going to be a little more awkward, having a lot of stills instead of straight gameplay. You know, I've always thought that making reviews was easy, and I've never had a problem making reviews before. But this game, this visual novel that I have been waiting to come west on consoles for a long time, this has been very difficult to review. Not because it's hard to outline the pros and cons of the game, but because of the game itself. Even recording the background music for this review was very difficult to do without me literally breaking down in tears. But let's get right to it. Here is my review of The House in Fata Morgana for the PlayStation Vita. This story surrounds a shadow, a spirit with no memories that shows up at a haunted mansion. When he arrives, a ghostly maid is waiting for them, shocked that they have no memories of who they are and what they're doing. So the maid takes the spirit's hand and leads them through the history of the house and the people who've lived there in the hopes that they'll regain their memories and be able to do what they were meant to do. The story of this game is long, but it's full of horror, gothic themes, and a lot of human emotion. Every character you meet in the game has some tragedy behind them, and you use each of those tragedies to piece together a puzzle on what's really going on in the game. Now, this game has some long story arcs to it, but they're beautifully written and everything balances out and comes together perfectly. It's also an extremely emotional experience. It's a horror game, but it's filled with emotion from start to finish. The tragedies are all written so well that I don't think I've ever cried so many times reading a single story, be it a visual novel or something else. Granted, I don't think that's a bad thing. It does an extremely good job of introducing you to characters, getting to know them, and crushing both their and your hearts when you least expect it. When it comes to gameplay, this is a visual novel with a lot of choice elements, letting you enjoy and experience the story while also being able to make different choices so you can see different endings. First of all, this is very different even from the Japanese PS Vita version of this game. As I mentioned in the intro, this does not work on the PlayStation TV, but the Japanese version does. This also gives you a lot of content. This game has the original House in Fata Morgana release, the Requiem prequel that released on Steam last year, and an entirely new scenario that they brought in voice actors for called Reincarnation that takes place after the main game. It goes without question that this is the best bang for your buck if you want to experience this visual novel. You'd have to pay $40 for just the base game and the prequel on Steam, but you pay $40 here and get that plus the entire new scenario. Of course, when you start the game, you don't have access to everything, you only have access to the original game. That's because A Requiem for Innocence and Reincarnation both have massive in-game spoilers for the original game in them. Of course, if you played the original game and just want to play the new stuff, the main menu also has a backdoor section that lets you do a little quiz to test your knowledge, and that will unlock everything all at once. So even if you do have knowledge of the original game, you don't have to go through that lengthy adventure if you just want to watch Reincarnation. Now, when you start playing the game, it's kind of your typical visual novel. You go through story scenes and you have choices, and you've got typical visual novel features like saving and loading data, skipping text, and auto-advancing text. Though it does have a handy autosave feature that you can play with in the options, so if you forget to manually save when you get to a choice, it'll automatically save for you. This really works well not only because there are long stretches of story between choices, but some choices are timed, so if you mess up the timing of it, you're not completely screwed out of having to go back and skip through the entire game up to that point. Now, all of this comes together quite well, and you have an overwhelming amount of content here. I knew that the game was long because of the readings on the How Long to Beat website, but they are completely wrong. It took me almost 49 hours to get through the base game with auto advance on with pretty fast text speed. And the Requiem and Reincarnation expansions easily add another 25 to 30 hours onto that. That's 50 to 80 hours of content for a visual novel. So if you were worried about not having enough content and length for the money you were paying, don't be. Now let's get into presentation. This game has beautiful artwork, and it's what drew me to it in the first place years ago when I was researching Japanese PlayStation TV compatibility. Granted, the art in this version of the game is different from the original release. It is beautifully detailed and has a sort of porcelain design to it. The audio is also extremely exceptional. All of the music tracks in the game really fit the mood well and are really enchanting and full of emotion. So much so that every time I hear the song you're listening to in the background of this review, called Everybody's Crying, I end up doing exactly that. Granted, there is one little bummer when it comes to audio. There is no voice acting in the original game, only in the new scenario called Reincarnation. And when it comes to performance, I don't really have any complaints. It never crashed on me, it never lagged or froze on me, so it's optimized pretty well. Now, in conclusion, The House in Fata Morgana is a collection of visual novels that is finally available on handheld consoles in English. Now, on the downside, the original game and the Requiem prequel still have no voice acting. But if you can look past that and deal with not having voice acting for most of the game, this has an overwhelming amount of content and a story that will break your heart over and over again. Reviews to Go rates The House in Fata Morgana for the PlayStation Vita a 9.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.